Greetings, everyone. My name is Shwa, and I'm the host and founder of a podcast called Light Up with Shwa. It's a weekly podcast on conscious living and parenting, and I hope you have liked it or subscribed to it. And if you haven't, you can maybe, after listening to my guest today, rush to the like button and rush to the subscribe button and get my updates, weekly updates about my podcast and my programs that are coming this year. You can visit my website, lightupwithshwa.com, and you can leave a comment or feedback or any question you have. There's a record, a very easy app there. You can just press the record button and record anything you want to say. I am assuming that it will be respectful and constructive critique or feedback, or a comment or a testimonial if you want to drop in. You can leave a comment in writing as well. I am on most of the platforms nowadays, which is YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and you name it, in iTunes and Spotify, definitely, and most of the other audio podcast platforms. I have a very special guest today with me. I want to say that Michael is, I learned about him, I met him at an interfaith organization, and actually I never realized, I remember that he had told me that he's a lawyer and advocate, as we say in the US, but he never came across like that. He was very gentle and polite, and I thought lawyers are very aggressive and and he maybe always questioning. But yeah, he was always gentle and nicely questioning, learning, but not questioning as such, but learning about you and your faith. And so we had very interesting conversations. We were in numerous group settings and doing our workshops and all. So I'm very happy and grateful for him to take out time today to talk to me, and I am very happy to share our conversation with you today. So Michael, please introduce yourself with your full name and what do you do?
Okay, Shwa, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel honored to be your guest today. And my name is Michael Felsen. Yes, it's true. I have had a career as a lawyer. I still am a lawyer. I finished a career with the government, with the U.S. Department of Labor, where I worked for 39 years, doing work protecting the rights of workers, basically, to get paid properly and to have a safe and healthy workplace, and to make sure that their pensions were paid properly, and a number of other laws that are on the federal statutes, federal government laws protecting workers. That was my career. I finished that career sort of leading an office of 25 lawyers that covered New England. We covered the New England region, the six New England states. But I have to tell you, Shwa, that you mentioned that I didn't seem like a lawyer. I don't. My primary identification as a human being is definitely not as being a lawyer. Okay, it's true that was a job that I had, and it was a skill that I learned. But if anything, really, I identified more as being a civil servant in terms of my career. You know, basically, I was pleased to be able to work for the government and with the government in a function that I really believed in. I don't believe in all functions that the government undertakes, but I'm not a small government person. I think government has should have a major role in societies, and the role that I was able to play, within the government was helping workers to get what they're entitled to under laws that were intended to protect them. So I always felt good about the work that I was doing. Okay. Which anyway, yes, I could go on, but I
know. No, that's good. That's all good. Yeah.
I'm still functioning as a lawyer. In fact, one of the things that I do now have done right after I retired, and during, especially, I retired in 2018. Sort of in the middle of the Trump administration. I was, very very distressed about the way that immigrants were being treated by the Trump administration. So one of the things that I did was I started volunteering to function as a lawyer, going into ICE detention centers and taking the testimonies of people who were seeking asylum, in this country, but who were, in jail, basically were incarcerated because, they, for whatever reason, they didn't have authorization to be in the United States. And now they were seeking asylum. So I would take their testimonies down, and I would bring them back to the organization that I was working with, called PAIR. And they would determine whether somebody had a strong case or not. And if they did, they would try to find a lawyer for the person. And eventually they asked me to take a case. So I actually have an asylum case with a Rwandan man who had to leave his country because he was in great danger and had been tortured and so forth. So, that's sort of an aside. Most of the lawyer stuff that I do is still about workers and protecting workers, especially low wage workers from immigrant backgrounds and people of color, and sort of helping them to empower themselves to organize and to assert their rights, as human beings and as workers in this country.
Excellent. Very nice. Well, I didn't know that. I thought when we say retired, which I really like, I'm glad that you're working also. Like, yes, you're retired from that, job or that status that you had, but you are continuing with your profession. Otherwise, it would be wasteful, right? I mean, you're, and especially helping the weak. I think I see that strand in helping the labor and immigrants and people of color and all. So that's very good service. I think that's what is needed, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like I want to continue to do it as long as my brain cells allow me to.
Yes,
and
that's very good.
We'll see how that goes.
And I think using your brain and your brain cells will continue, giving you more youthful brain cells and more energy to do this service that you're doing. I think that's what I have learned. But if you don't use it, I guess then it's gonna slow down.
Yeah, no, I feel very energized by it, and I feel like, knock on wood, so far my brain cells have not been letting me down. Other than when if I as I said, if I wake up in the middle of the night and think about all the things that I need to do, then the next day my brain cells aren't firing quite the way I want them to. But that's part of life, right?
Yes, that's true. We all have our days and nights like that. Yep. So it means you enjoy what you do.
It's a funny thing now that this is triggering in my own head. Something that I was once asked when I was applying to basically be in what's called the senior executive service in the government, which ultimately I reached, and I was being interviewed by a couple of people to see if I would qualify for this program. And I said, my main professional identity, I see myself as a problem solver. Like that's what I aspire to do. I may not succeed in doing it, but if there are problems, I aspire to try to solve them. And sometimes your legal skills can help you do that, but sometimes it's something else, some other communication skills or persuasive skills. And you don't have to be a lawyer to be able to be a good persuader, for example, and to be able to communicate with people well and try to understand them and see how do we get to yes, how do we get to a place where we actually can agree with one another and make the problem, if not go away, diminish the problem, that kind of thing.
So you have lots of yeses in your database?
I have some yeses. I'm proud of some yeses.
Okay.
And I certainly have some no's also.
All right. But which one is heavy?
Most of all, I have maybes. The maybes are the biggest ones.
Okay. So we have maybes and then yeses and then no's.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say. In fact, it's funny. I was just telling one of the things that I do is I have little mentoring sessions with law students who come to work for the small nonprofit that I'm a volunteer with, and I'm called an Access to Justice Fellow.
Oh, nice.
With. And the law students like me to tell stories, kind of my war stories, because some of them are certainly over a long career pretty interesting. But just this last Friday, I was speaking with a law student. She said, I said, what would you like to talk about? She said, just tell me another war story. So I chose, in my first year as a lawyer, I chose, well, between the first and the second year, I chose a couple of cases where I lost the case. I just lost, and one of them was a case where I really shouldn't have lost. I think the judge was just wrong, and it didn't work out the way it should have. But you have to take those slings and arrows sometimes. The other one was a case that I thought for sure I would win, and I lost it because I didn't realize something that I should have picked up on. And I was just, kind of conveying that to her to just let her know that, we're all fallible. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to not be able to get the result that we want. And you get up and you keep going. And you try the next one, the next time. And you learn obviously from the mistakes that you've made. And, this, if you don't mind, this brings me to another quick
Sure,
story,
please.
Which is that when I was in my previous job at the Labor Department, we had a lot of interns there, and one of the interns that we had, I would have my door open, say, if you want to come talk to me, please come talk to me. And one of the young interns was a young man who was he was in college. He aspired to go to law school. But he was still in college, and he wasn't sure he could do it. And, we would chat about what he was doing to apply or, think about. And, he was saying that he was having a hard time studying for the law school, achievement test. And because, he was, it was hard for him to, to focus on it and so forth. And I told him, I said, I just want you to know that, I know. And he said to me, and the reason is I'm dyslexic, and I said, oh, that's very interesting. I said, I just was visiting with one of my dearest friends, longest friends, who's a child psychiatrist. And he's known me for, almost 50 years, really. And I think I was talking to him about what a slow reader I am. And he said, Michael, I've always thought that you actually were a little bit dyslexic. And I said, really? I said, that's Tony, you never told me that before. That's the first time I heard that. Anyway, so I told this young man, I said, I want you to know that this just happened a few weeks ago. My friend Tony said that he thought I was dyslexic. And the young man just he almost started crying. He was just so happy that someone, because I had achieved a certain status. I was the regional solicitor in the Department of Labor, and I was sitting with him talking about his situation. He said, you're dyslexic like I am, that means I can do something like this too.
So that really,
I was so happy that those things just happened to come together at that moment, because again, it was really a funny coincidence that my friend had just said that. Anyway, I'm going a little off track here.
No, that's good. But my question would be, how did you end up being a lawyer, or what made you choose this profession?
Mm-hmm. So, my father was a scientist, and he believed that science was really the only thing that intelligent people should do. He had a fairly limited perspective on these things, but I went to a school, I grew up in New York City. I went to a school called the Bronx High School of Science because, I was a young man and I was in my father's house and he thought I should do that. It was a general school, but it specialized in science. And it was one of these schools you had to take a test to get into it, but it was part of the New York City public school system. And meanwhile, and you'll find this interesting, Shwa, is that I took a first year in college psychology class called social. So my major was actually social relations, is what it was called.
Oh, okay.
And I took a class and I was completely intrigued by it. And I thought, now this stuff I find really, really interesting. And I remember, going home and, for Christmas break or whatever it was, and telling my father, I said, I'm not going to be doing science. I'm interested in doing psychology and social relations. And he was absolutely crestfallen, and and literally said, I can't believe it. Smart people should do science. Anyway, this is a long way of getting to answer your question, which is that I majored in social relations. That's what I got a degree in. I graduated college in the middle of the Vietnam war. So I was protesting, spending a lot of my college days going to Washington, D.C., protesting against the war. And when I graduated, I had no plans to do anything other than take a break, move to Vermont, which I did. And I did leather work, which I had learned when I was in college as a way to make some money on the side, making leather bags and belts, things like that.
Nice.
And I sold them actually in the Greenwich Village Outdoor Art Show in New York City. Nice. And I moved, but I also had taught Head Start in the summers, and so I moved to Vermont and ended up teaching Head Start, and then I became a counselor in a program for unemployed adults and high school dropouts, and I did that for a few years in Vermont, and I found it very frustrating because I felt like the system is just stacked against these people, people who drop out of high school, come from, low income backgrounds and the town where I was working had been a paper mill town. The paper mill had shut down. There were no jobs. People were on welfare. It was distressing. And I felt like, we need more systemic, ways to address these problems rather than just this individualized kind of thing. And, so I talked to some friends who had, were going to law school. And I said, maybe I should try that. And I actually, I only applied to one law school because I was skeptical. But I applied to Northeastern Law School because it had a reputation for social justice kind of law and being very committed to not corporate law, not all the other kinds of law, but really law for the people.
You said I was skeptical, so I applied only to one college. Like, what were you skeptical about?
I was skeptical about what I felt like if I'm going to go to law school, I want to do, and I had a limited amount of knowledge about what the different law schools offered. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I wanted a law school that would offer this kind of sort of social justice program.
Not Harvard?
Not Harvard. I mean, I was intimidated by the idea of going to Harvard, to tell you the truth, but that's not why I mean, as you can tell, I was sort of on the fence about going to law school at all. But I felt like if I'm going to go at all, it's only going to be to Northeastern because that's the kind of law I want to practice. Okay. And, so I ended up getting it there and that's where I went. And I was not disappointed at all because Northeastern, especially back in those days, but I think still to this day, really, I mean, it was the best group of students that I'd ever been with, I mean, I did go to Harvard undergraduate and I felt very, alienated from, large portions of that student body who had gone to prep school, which is not my background and all that, there were way fewer public school, people. So, but Northeastern were people of kindred spirits to me in terms of what we cared about. And it was a good choice. And shortly thereafter, I mean, and the other thing I'll say about it is that I realized that like the way my brain works is very suitable to being a lawyer because I think a lot about to be a good lawyer, you have to be thinking in analogies. It's all about comparing.
That's what I was going to say. Like you must be very good in analysis and
well, it's analysis, but it's also it's comparing one thing to another and seeing how are they the same and how are they different.
So how did you know about that? So you were a very self-reflective person since a young age, or you knew yourself? Because half of the time of life is spent in understanding ourselves and we are and what we like.
Well, I guess I mean before I went to law school, I suppose I wasn't sure that I necessarily had that skill, but very quickly, once I was there and I saw how you're supposed to, think like a lawyer, that's what they say, that came naturally to me, so I didn't really need to learn it. I kind of knew how to do it intuitively. And then I just applied it to the studies, and yeah.
Very nice. Very good. I'm glad that worked out for you, I guess. I mean, it doesn't really happen, and to consciously decide and to go into something as, was the path strenuous? Was it challenging? The law path?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it that are challenging. I ended up joining I clerked for 1 year for a judge in the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, who was a wonderful man, a really progressive man, and we did some really. I was proud to be part of his team, where we did some really important cases that changed the law in Massachusetts and in the whole country, including, for example, making sure that juries in criminal cases are not tainted by racial discrimination. In other words, it used to be that juries, that a prosecutor in a criminal case could get rid of all the black people on a jury using what are called peremptory challenges if it was a black defendant, who was accused of killing a white person, for example.
Oh, wow.
Which this particular case that I worked on was about that. It was actually about a Harvard football player from the North End, a white young man who was part of a big group. They got into a brawl in what was called the combat zone back in those days, down in Washington Street in downtown Boston. This Harvard football player's star got killed by a black man, and 3 black men were convicted of first-degree murder, in his stabbing. And the case came up to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, and one of the challenges was, the jury, they were appealing, these 3 men who were convicted of first-degree murder. They were appealing, and one of the grounds for appeal, which they didn't expect to win, but they put it in there, was that the prosecutor used peremptory challenges to have an all-white jury. And the reason I say they didn't expect to win that was because at that point, that same court 2 years earlier had said it's perfectly all right. You're allowed, prosecutors are allowed to do that. And we knew that there was something deeply wrong about that. But the U.S. Supreme Court had said it's okay, and the Massachusetts Supreme Court had said it's okay. And so I was sort of assigned the case, and the judge said, let's just wait for a while, and just by force of whatever, one of the other clerks came by and he said, Michael, you have to take a look at this decision. The decision had just come out of California, where under the California Bill of Rights, California said, we're not going to allow this anymore. And they were the first court in the country to say, we're not going to allow blacks to be, just eliminated from juries using peremptory challenges in that way, or anywhere. I mean, you can't use racial categories as a way of culling out, people from the community. So we ended up writing a decision that based on the Massachusetts Bill of Rights, Massachusetts Declaration of Rights, that this was not going to be allowed anymore. And the judge was able to convince all of the other judges to that, and it was a unanimous decision. And then a few years later, the U.S. Supreme Court changed their precedent. So
excellent. So that is something big. That is a big thing to amend or change, or what would you say? This was not an amendment. This was it an amendment?
No, it was a change in the law. I mean, the law.
That's pretty big. Yeah.
It was quite big and very exciting to be part of that. And I was lucky to be working for that particular judge. Judge Liacos was his name.
That's very nice.
And then from there, I went to the Labor Department and was there for the next 39 years.
Right. So you must be happy and comfortable there. That's why you were there for that long.
Yeah, but just now I know I keep going on these long tangents, but on as far as when you say was it challenging, I mean, one of the things that was challenging was that it it was a trial office. It was what's called a litigation office, so that we, not all lawyers go into court. A lot of them just sort of negotiate or draft papers or whatever, do estates or something like that. But this was we would go into court and sue employers who had violated, laws, that protected workers. And as soon as I got there, I was given, cases, and they said, "Here's your caseload, go handle these cases." And that was intimidating. That was very challenging because I'd never had that experience, and I needed to kind of, jump into the cold water and try to swim. And, that was intimidating, as I say. But, once you start doing it, you push yourself to be courageous and to take it on, and you start learning, and, which is not to say that each time you don't get, butterflies in your stomach or whatever, but then you go forward and you do it. And it became a very gratifying thing. It's also something that would really get your adrenaline going. I mean, going into doing a trial you have to be very focused all the time, listening to everything, objecting on evidence and making sure that you're getting your stuff in properly and being able to make arguments on your feet, that's challenging. And I, in a way I regret, because I became a supervisor after about 10 years. I stopped doing the court trials, the courtroom stuff as much. I mean, just very rarely, once I became, got up to these next levels, the other people were doing that. But but anyway, it was overall a very, very gratifying career. And,
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Is there any feeling that whenever you are in a conversation with somebody that you know that you're gonna win? Is there? That doesn't matter.
I wish. Schwartz, it's not about winning. It's about finding common ground. It's about respecting one another, listening to one another, and hopefully coming to some kind of common ground. And this is something that I'm very interested in. Particularly now. Certainly over the last 4 or 5 years during the whole Trump era, the divide in our country is just so gaping. It's such a gaping chasm between people who continue to support Donald Trump, who is somebody who I have great antipathy towards, as a supposed leader of the United States and the most powerful person in the world. For that person to have ascended to that rank is just unthinkable that he was there for 4 years. But and people still support that, and I find it very difficult to. I don't really know, probably anybody who is an avid Trump supporter, but I feel like I should. I need to. I would like to be in the same space as people in that situation and who have those beliefs. Given how strong my own beliefs are, and I'm sure how strong their beliefs are, and find a way to bring, to somehow bring things together, because otherwise we live in a country that's basically split in half, and
so I guess that it hasn't happened yet. So you are still willing to be in that space with somebody who totally disagrees with you and is a supporter of someone which we never imagined can be the leader of United States.
Well, absolutely, because other folks they're human beings too, and you want to understand where are they coming from, how did they get to their belief system,
So I guess I have to wait for that moment, because then I will know that Michael is able to bring that person.
That will be the test.
Yes, that would be a test. That would be a test.
But it's funny, Schwab, because one of the way I first got involved in interfaith work, and what really drew me to it, and I started out. I first met Rodney Peterson and Gadol Kader Asmal, in a different interfaith organization called the Interreligious Center for Public Life, and I was invited to join there because there was a tremendous dispute going on between the the organized Jewish community in Boston and the Muslim community in Boston that was trying to build a mosque in Roxbury. And it was, and I'm Jewish, you know, I don't consider myself part of the organized Jewish community, but the organization that I am close with and have been, you know, involved with and in leadership for different periods of time, called Boston Workers Circle, which is a secular, progressive, cultural, and educational Jewish organization, community organization. You know, we felt very strongly that, you know, that the Muslim community had a right to build their mosque, and that these sort of right-wing elements, you know, in the Jewish community and Fox News and other right-wing elements who were trying to block it, you know, on the basis that it was being financed by terrorists and things like that was awful, you know. So, you know, we worked on trying to broker a mediated resolution of this conflict, because there were lawsuits that were filed, and, you know, just, you know, news programs, as I said, on Fox TV that were very inflammatory. And, you know, we got involved. I personally got very involved, and ultimately, you know, thankfully those particular, the lawsuits were dropped, and the conflicts were resolved. At least on you know, on the surface, there was still other things bubbling underground. So I wanted to be involved in these interfaith forums where these difficult questions could be tackled, you know, including, for example, in the Jewish and Muslim communities, you know, Israel and the Palestinian situation, for example. You know, these tend to be questions that people don't want to talk about because they're so charged and they're so difficult. But, you know, to me, it's like, well, you know, if we don't deal with them directly, they just fester underground, and then things, you know, you don't know where things go. I mean, it's much better to show, you know, have shine light on these issues and let people talk and be respectful to one another, and, you know, acknowledge their differences, but realize that we all live on this planet together, and we need to find a way to and we live in the Boston community together. Even, you know, we need to find ways to do that in respectful ways, even with our disagreements. You know, so. And that applies, you know, as you say, to this red and blue divide between, you know, pro-Trump and anti-Trump, et cetera.
So you are a uniter. So I guess you were in that Roxbury Islamic Center, Islamic Cultural Center, part of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was very involved in that.
Okay. Okay. That's very good. Good to know, because I learned about it, but I didn't know who was involved and who was not. So that's good to know. Thank you for doing that.
No, it was an honor to be able to do it. And as I always said, every time I went to that mosque, you know, because we had built such deep friendships, you know, me with the guy who had been the leader at the time, Bilal Kaleem, you know, and then Yusuf Ivali more recently. Yes. You know, and I would get invited to, you know, to different events and you know, feasts and you know, I said, I feel at home here. You know, I felt very welcomed. You know, I always enjoyed going to the mosque, you know,
I had the same experience. I have been to many synagogues. It's nice to visit each other's houses of worship. I think that's one way to learn about one another and give yourself and others a chance to be in that space, as you said earlier. I think it helps. So, yeah, very nice. Thank you. So I guess you have started the interfaith topic already before I went into it. So,
among the things I know you're interested in, it's sort of like, what's my faith practice or whatever. I don't know whether you're going to get to that or not, but just I'll encapsulate it here, because this I thought was, I love this story.